เมื่อทั้งสองฝ่ายที่ขัดแย้งกันผ่านการต่อสู้มาอย่างยาวนานและเริ่มมองไม่เห็นว่าความรุนแรงจะนำมาซึ่งสิ่งที่ตัวเองต้องการได้อย่างไรกระบวนการสร้างสันติภาพจึงเริ่มเป็นทางออกที่เหล่าคู่ขัดแย้งมองเห็นแต่เงื่อนไขสำคัญเงื่อนไขหนึ่งของการเจรจาคือการเรียกร้องให้มีการวางอาวุธของฝ่ายต่อสู้ด้วยความรุนแรงอย่างกลุ่ม IRA
What was the most difficult points during the talk or negotiation?
The most difficult point for my own party, the Democratic Unionist Party, and I wasn't a member in those days, was that that there were going to be prisoners who were going to be released, and so my party would have opposed that. The party sees itself very much as a law and order party. The other big aspect of it was that we were certainly saying in those days, look, we don't want to go into government with Sinn Féin until there's decommissioning. We see the product, not just Sinn Féin, but the loyalists as well, would disarm. And that didn't happen. So my party opposed the Good Friday Agreement and walked away from it. But when it was implemented, they took their seats as an opposition in many ways. And eventually, thankfully, the decommissioning came about both for the IRA and for the loyalist, unionist, pro-British paramilitaries.
How did the IRA finally agree to lay down their arms?
Well, the IRA was convinced after the Good Friday period that the process was consolidated, that the peace process was a reality, that we had a political and democratic way forward. So the IRA took a view that it no longer needed to carry out an armed campaign because people could pursue those political objectives for reuniting Ireland.
ไมเคิล คูเบิร์ตเป็นอดีตสมาชิกกลุ่มกองกำลังติดอาวุธ IRA ที่เลือกจะใช้ความรุนแรงเพื่อปลดปล่อยไอร์แลนด์เหนือออกจากสหราชอาณาจักรไมเคิล คูเบิร์ตเคยถูกจำคุก 16 ปีฐานฆ่าเจ้าหน้าที่ตำรวจแต่วันนี้เขาคือหนึ่งในผู้ที่หันมาใช้กระบวนการสันติภาพในการแก้ปัญหา
Michael, why did you resort to violence in the first place?
In Ireland, particularly in the Belfast area, there was a lot of student agitation for political reform, and we were beaten off the streets. It had a motivation in me for being anti the state, but not enough motivation to mobilise me to move against the state. But there were certain actions which were carried out on other people who were participating in civil rights marches. A lot of people were shot dead, and that was probably the turning point in me. And I didn't want my children to be raised in a place where I didn't think they would have equality of citizenship in the society. So I decided to play a role in trying to remove the British rule from Ireland.
So you decided to take up arms. Aren't there any other alternatives?
Well, there was no political representation which would have been in any way effective. That was my view then. Nor were there any indicators that the British government were prepared to introduce any reform. They weren't prepared to introduce electoral reform. They weren't prepared to move to bring anti-discrimination legislation in. It seemed a bit hopeless. Therefore, I decided to go down the non-dialogue route.
But in the end, you actually put down your arms. What happened? 16 years in prison changed your mind?
16 years of prison would certainly give me a lot of time for interaction and dialogue with my comrades in prison. But the totality of circumstances outside of prison within society was gradually changing. There was a major rise in support for a particular political party which would have represented my views. That was Sinn Féin. That was going on. There was a major statement by a senior British politician that the British government no longer had a strategic interest in remaining in Ireland. And that was a major, major statement. That sort of translates into, if circumstances were right, you don't have to fight us, we will go. That's what we heard. At the same time, we knew that the British government were in dialogue with the IRA, and there's only one road that could possibly lead So there was a lot of talk about negotiating a settlement because the IRA seemed to be coming to terms that it wasn't going to beat the British military. And the British military had, in interviews with the media, indicated that they didn't consider they would defeat the IRA. So morally, we felt that the onus was on us as the Irish people, Irish fighters, to consider cessation.
But laying down your arms, wasn't that like a surrender? You're an IRA fighter.
A lot of people had a lot of interest in the situation in Ireland, particularly the South Africans. The South Africans who had come through decades of guerrilla warfare and open warfare with the South African forces. Some of their leaders came to Ireland, people who had been commanders in the field, who are now political representatives. They came and talked to Republicans. They explained talking is always better than fighting. I mean, one thing we're going to have to realise, people who take up arms aren't sort of animals. We're human beings with all the feelings that everybody else has. Who wants to fight? I was a civil servant. I was a social worker also. I mean, extraordinary times bring extraordinary decisions with people. So the one thing that you want is peace, but it has to be a just peace. It has to be a peace which ensures equality and a change in society, or else what we were fighting about. But we were quite confident that there was public support for the change and public support for the cessation. And that's how it's turned out to be. Because in the 20 years since the peace, the party which pushed the peace within my sector of Irish society has gradually risen in popularity and now is the biggest political party in Ireland. So what you have to say, with the benefit of hindsight, it was a very good move to make because the people have supported it.
การตระหนักว่าความรุนแรงไม่ใช่ทางออกที่ดีและการสร้างกระบวนการสันติภาพที่จริงใจและน่าไว้ใจเป็นสิ่งสำคัญนะคะที่จะทำให้ทุกฝ่ายหันหน้ามาคุยกันได้ค่ะสัปดาห์หน้าเราจะมาคุยกันต่อกับทุกฝ่ายที่เกี่ยวข้องกับความขัดแย้งในไอร์แลนด์เหนือว่ามีปัจจัยอะไรอื่นที่ทำให้กระบวนการสันติภาพนั้นประสบความสำเร็จค่ะวันนี้สวัสดีค่ะ